Hi, everybody. Good morning. As always, I am really, really happy to be here. And it's especially interesting for me because I've never given the class in the morning. It's always morning for you, always afternoon for me. So that's a new experience in itself. Now I get to live what I always tell you that it's such a nice way to start off the morning, visiting Eretz Yisrael, talking about Eretz Yisrael, thinking about it. And I am happy I get to do the same. I came last Thursday to America, so I'm also missing Israel. I'm happy to get a chance to go back. I'm going to share my screen with you. And this was not planned on purpose because I worked really, really hard in the month of June to plan all of the classes I was going to give so I wouldn't have to work so hard over the summer. And it happens to be that it connects perfectly to this week's parasha, so that is an added bonus. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. Today we are going to be talking about the city of Tiberia. It's been on my list for a really long time. Now, Tiberia, most people know as a city you go to because you want to eat at the really great restaurant there, which we're going to talk about at the end, or because it's near the Kinneret, really great swimming, all things which are true and definite advantage of the city. The city is about so much more, and we're going to focus on three different aspects, and it would just really, really enrich a trip there because if you go to Tveria, and there's even more that I could have fit for another time, if you go to the city and you're aware of all of these things, every step in the street, every breath you take is just that much more meaningful because you are aware of all of these things. I want to open up with a shul. This shul happens to be a shul in Jerusalem. It's called the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shul. And in designing shul, whether it be in Israel or in America or anywhere else in the world, one of the considerations and one of the things that people know is that they're not going to put pictures of people on the walls. They're not going to put it in front of the Aron because all we have to do is open up the Ten Commandments, look at the second commandment, which is in this week's parasha, again in Parashat Vayet Chanan, and lo ta'aseh lecha fesa v'cho temuna. You can't do these kinds of things. So usually they have mosaic windows, which are intricate. You're not exactly sure what it is, some kind of design, but they're very careful about these kind of things. Now, what if I told you that there was a synagogue from the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara in a city in which the Sanhedrin sat, that not only were there pictures of people, but the people weren't even wearing clothing? And what if not only were the pictures of people and pictures of animals, there was also in the center of the shul a picture of the sun god, not a picture of the sun god, and who's not our God because we don't have a sun god, we only have one God. And this is where the Sanhedrin go and pray. What if I told you all that? So all this is not theoretical because this is in fact the case, and it's the case in more than one shul. This mosaic that you see over here, we're going to talk about today. This picture over here is the sun god, Helios, the sun god. What is he doing in a shul in Tiberia, which is the last stop of the Sanhedrin? What is the sun god doing as well in a shul in Bet Alpha, which is another place in Israel? What are all these zodiac signs doing in another place in Israel? And it's very surprising. And one of the I love Israel for a lot of reasons, but another reason is because there's things that surprise us, and a lot of times we are so sure things are a certain way and have to be a certain way, and then we go and we discover discoveries from long ago and see, you know what, maybe things were a little bit different. And I think it just really expands our mind, if nothing else. And it's beautiful and all those other things. So the three questions we're going to focus on are: one, where can you find the shul with the sun god in its center and why? The why is huge. Two, who are some rabbis associated with Tveria and why? And three, what are some nearby attractions? Because you cannot come to the Kinneret without jumping in and knowing about the fun things that are there. So, as we usually start, where is Tiberia? We start out in Yerushalayim, about a 2.5 hour drive. We get to the city of Tiberia. Really beautiful, very famous because of the gorgeous Kinneret. A little bit of background of the city. The city Tiberius or Tiberia is named after a Roman emperor, Tiberius. It was built by Herod's son, and it was a city that had a lot of prominence in the time of the Byzantine Empire, which is the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Talmud Yerushalmi was completed there. A lot of it was written there and was completed there. And it was a very serious city of Talmidei Chachamim. The Romans had joined the city, but it was also a bustling Jewish city as well. There's just some background that we know it was really, really important. And we are going to enter a synagogue, shul in Tiberia, which actually, if you've ever been to Tiberia, you most probably passed it because it's on the highway. It's not out of the way. But most itineraries do not include stops there. So now I want yours to include one. After preparing this Zoom, I said I need to go back and see it again because I was just so intrigued by what I once saw, what I learned again. So this shul was built and rebuilt a few times, third, fourth, and sixth centuries. The century we're going to focus on is the fourth century, this mosaic that we have in the middle. There's three parts to it. We're going to focus on each part. Now, the first section is something that's not surprising to us, something really beautiful, something that gives us a window into how they decorated shuls back then. The most Jewish symbol was a menorah. Magen David only developed later. If the Jews wanted to represent Judaism, they would draw a menorah. And here we see that there are two menorah. We'll start with the Aron Kodesh. This is a picture of the Aron, and you see the parochet tied over here. Menorah. And notice that the menorah has three legs, as is written in Sefer Shemot. Now, I think today, I don't know this for a fact, that this is the general thinking, but a lot of times when we think of a menorah, we think of the menorah, which is in the Arch of Titus or in the symbol of the state of Israel that has a base and not three legs. But any single mosaic, any single ancient menorah you're going to find has three legs. That's the way people depicted it. That's the way the Pesukim write it. The reason why it changed in the symbol of Israel is because they were modeling it after the menorah in the Arch of Titus, and that did not have three legs. Why not? We could make up theories about it, but that's something interesting to notice. This is a shofar, which is another very Jewish symbol. Here is a machta that they would use to do ketoret, lulav and etrog. And another really interesting thing that we see the dedication to the Pesukim. If you notice the flames, they're all facing towards the middle. As it says in Bamidbar, Daber el Aharon v'amarta elav v'alotcha tanedot el mul pnei hamenorah ya'iru shiv'at tanedot. The candles are supposed to shine towards the middle one. So we see that depicted on both sides and both menorah. So this is the top of the mosaic, very pretty, very Jewish. We can understand why all of these things were chosen. Now, this is the middle section, which we're going to come back to, but just to give an overview, we have Helios, the sun god, in the middle. The reason why there's this line, the lacking and ruining part of the mosaic is in the later century, in the 6th century, they just had a wall there, which ruined it. And we see over here zodiac signs for the 12 months of the year, and written next to each one is not the month, rather the name of the sign, and we're going to look at a few of them. In the four corners over here are the four seasons depicted by women in the appropriate headdress and clothing based on that season. So that's the middle section. Let's look at the women. So this woman is representing summer. She has a sickle in her hand to cut the wheat. She also has barley by her head. She has a crown on her head. This is summer, Tammuz. Here we have the fall. We have grapes in the woman's hand, and she has pomegranates on her head. Here is another one, spring. And other things I want you to notice. So one of the zodiac signs is Deli. And for anyone that reads Hebrew, if you look at this, you see that it's written backwards. This is how it's supposed to be written. Why is it written backwards? And one of the theories suggested is that the people that made these mosaics, they were hired by the Jewish people of Tveria, but they weren't actually Jewish themselves. And because they weren't Jewish, they couldn't really read Hebrew. So they didn't know that it was backwards. And notice that you have a man over here representing this sign. Another example where we see the backwards writing, Dagim. This one I think is harder to see because it kind of looks the right way, but the top of the Gimel is backwards. So Dagim, also another example. And it's amazing how vibrant the colors are from so many years ago. Another thing I want you to notice, so here is Moznaim, which means a scale. It's spelled wrong, there's no aleph. And the man is naked, doesn't have a brit milah, if you're really getting that close. And let me remind us that this is a shul that we're talking about. What is a naked man doing in a shul? What are these women doing in the shul in the corners? Now, it was a little bit hard to see the clothing from here, but the standards of sniyut, which are explained today and expected women to upheld, were not upheld by these women in the four corners. What is all of this doing? It says in the Torah, as we quoted earlier, That's exactly what we see in the shul. This is just not any shul or random city. We said Tveria was a bustling Jewish city. The last place where the Sanhedrin sat was in Tveria. They knew what was going on. What was all of this doing here? So I'm going to suggest some theories, and we still didn't even get to the main question. One theory is that during this time period, the Jews said that this prohibition of the Torah is when it's connected to worship, not to beauty. This is just to beautify the shul. We're not doing avodah, we're not doing worship towards these images, so it's fine. So that's one theory to explain. I want to put that on the side and now look at something most surprising, which I'm still shocked by it. Even though I'm used to it and now I'm going to propose all ideas, I will say that I'm very shocked. This over here is a very vibrant, colorful picture of the sun god named as Helios from Greek mythology. And I want to just point out different aspects of him. One, he is driving a chariot connected to horses. He has this beautiful robe. His arm is outstretched in power. He's holding the world. Which one came up now? He has a whip in his hand also to show power. He has a halo coming out of his head. A lot of people think, or not a lot of people think, but in Christianity, if you are familiar with any Christian images, when they want to show that one of the saints that's holy, they always have a halo coming out. And we see an earlier example of that from this is dating back to the Romans, that this is how they depicted it, halo and 7 rays coming out. And here's an interesting aspect. The people then, they knew that the world was round, because you see he's holding a round world. And it was only in the time of the Middle Ages that the church kind of messed things up. Oh, maybe the world is flat. But beforehand, people knew very well the world is round. As we see depicted here, he's holding a round world. Now, what is this doing in the shul? And there's no mistaking his identity. This is who is depicted. How? So we already said maybe it's for beautification, not for worship purposes. Okay, maybe. Another theory is maybe the Jews were forced by the surrounding culture to depict these images in their synagogue, and it's not representing their spiritual world. This is what the culture said. You must do these things. If you're going to build a synagogue, you have to put it in. Okay? Another example, which I don't know if this helps or makes things harder. In Shira Shirim is a pasuk, which we see over here. Amudav asa chesef lefidato zahav merkabo ad kaman tchor atzuf ahava mibnot Yerushalayim. And the Midrash says on the lines, Merkavo Argaman, Merkavo, his chariot is of purple. Zeh HaShemesh, Shunatun Lemala. This is referring to the sun that's in the sky. Urochev Merkava Umeir La'olam. And he's riding on a chariot and giving light to the world, just like it says, Vukachatan Yotzeh Mechupato. So we see over here in our own sources in the Midrash that the sun is kind of personified as riding in a chariot. And we saw in the example in the Greek mythology that the sun was personified. So maybe we have sources that also have something to do with that. So maybe that's another option. Personification is sun in the Midrash. Maybe it's related. The answer I like the best is number 4, which is not really an answer. And that's that matters and not really black and white. And I really, every time I think about this shul and think about the 10 Commandments and think about Judaism and the way we practice it, I like reminding myself that a lot of times we really think we know what God meant and we know what the Aseret HaDiberot meant and that we're so sure of it. And maybe there could be other interpretations. And I think as people, we like things to be black and white and fit in neat little boxes, and it doesn't. And it's just something to be aware of. I don't know that this is the answer I like the best, which is not even really an answer because I just don't like any of the other ones. And there's articles written about this and archaeologists, scholars, no one really knows why, because it's surprising to everyone. We wouldn't think that such pictures would be in shul, but it is, and I think it's cool to be aware of it. And if anyone has any other theories at the end of the class, they're welcome to propose some. That I'm going to skip for now. This part I really like. A lot of times when someone donates a lot of money to a shul or to a building or to anything, there's plaques put up, or there's name of the building is named after them. This wing is named after them. And sometimes people look at it and say, oh, you gave money just because you want your name up. And why can't you just give money and be happy with it? Why do you have to have your name? I want to say that we are not the first people to put our names inscribed on buildings or plaques to recognize that we did things. Because what you're looking at over here in the last part of the mosaic, there's 9 inscriptions. There's 9 different boxes, and these are all inscriptions to thanking the donors, because to build the synagogue back then, you needed a lot of money, and these are thanking the donors. And the shul is nicknamed the shul of Severus because it has a man named Severus that's listed twice. And you see on the side, there's 2 lions because the lions are supposed to be protecting the people that donated the money. So another thing, it just shows us that we weren't the first ones to come up with that idea, and back then too. And something I like, a more positive way to view it. Sometimes it's viewed negatively when people have their names up on plaques and buildings, but it could also encourage people to give. That you see these people have money and this is what they're giving towards. Maybe I want to give money towards that as well. So it's all in a matter of perspective, but it's interesting to see that Mishnah and the Gemara time period, we had people and inscriptions as well. And here's an example of the whole shul. I really want to go to Israel now and see it myself, because I thought the pictures were nice, but it's even more impressive in person. And it's interesting to discuss it. And if you go with your family, you could go alone too. But if you're going with your family, it opens a discussion about Judaism and what we do today and what we did back then, and what's allowed and what's not. Each one of the sections of the mosaic, whether it's what are symbols of Judaism, what symbols do we have in our life, whether it's the middle and you want to talk about Avodah Zarah or clothing or what we depict, or the third section about donations. Each one could open up such a topic of discussion. And this is only in one shul in Tiberia, which is on the highway, and look at how rich and how much you could talk about. So here's another new, or maybe something you were familiar with and now re-familiar with, aspect of Tiberia that you can discuss. Okay. Now I want to talk about who are some rabbis associated with Tiberia and why. So a question, rhetorical kind of question. Does anyone know the picture on the left whose grave that is? We're going to talk about this person a little bit. So the first question we spoke about, the second one we're working on now. Okay. If I throw out the word anenu to you, what is the next line that comes in your head? For most people, it would bring back the tefillah that we have on the high holidays or in Selichot. The Anenu song, everyone loves it when we're praying. Anenu, Avid Yaakov, Magen David. Now, there's one of the Anenus is Elhad de Meir. And I want to ask you myself, who is Meir? Now, if he made it into the Anenus, and how many other? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He must be really special if out of all the things we could ask, we're mentioning Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we're mentioning David, we're not mentioning Moshe, we're not mentioning Aharon, we're not mentioning Shemuel, but we're mentioning Meir. Who is this Meir? Another example of how this is in our tefillot, at least as Sephardim. This is Havdalah, as taken from the Siddur. The last line on the bottom, Elahad Meir Anenu. Same Meir. Who is this Meir out of all the people to speak about in our tefillah? We're saying, God of Meir, answer us. Who is this? Now, this Meir is, to expand on the name, we don't see it in these tefillah, but just an expansion. There's a rabbi named Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes, the master of the miracle. What miracle? What happened? Who is Meir? So that's another thing we're going to talk about today. And its connection to Tiberia is, as you are driving along the highway, you will notice 2 domes. And this is the grave of Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes, the Meir that is referred to in our Anenu Tefillah and in Havdalah for the Sephardim. And I'm going to address in a little bit why there are 2 domes and why it looks like this. One part is more rundown, one part is newer. Where is it? So as you are driving along the highway, if you are going to a hotel, the hotels are all further north. And here is the grave of Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes. You're also passing it on the way. Everything you're passing on the way, but this could be your destination. So So some background, Meir was a Bi Akiva student. He was a Tana. He lived in the time of the Mishnah. And anytime in the Mishnah, we have this line, Sta Mishnah Rabbi Meir. If there's a Mishnah and it's not attributed to a person thing, it's Rabbi Meir. Or if it says Acharim Omrim, this is also Rabbi Meir. So he's a serious Talmid Chacham, also known as Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes. For what miracle? So here is the story. Rabbi Meir has a wife who is one of the few women mentioned in the Gemara. Her name was Beruria. And Beruria had a sister. And her sister one day was taken captive to a house of prostitutes. And Beruria told Rabbi Meir, please go save my sister. So he dressed up as a Roman horseman. He took a coin, a bag of gold, and he comes to this house. And he speaks to the guard and he says, please, here's gold, use it to bribe whoever you want. Let me take this woman out. And the guard says, I'm not going to let this because thanks for the gold. But then, okay, I could use the gold to bribe the official higher than me when they say, hey, why is there a woman missing? But what about when it runs out? So the Rabbi Meir says, when it runs out, if you find yourself in a time of trouble, say Elaha de Meir aneni. And the Roman looks at him all skeptical, like, this is going to work. And to demonstrate what Rabbi Meir, and this story is written in the Gemara, what Rabbi Meir does next is he takes a stone and he throws it at these men-eating dogs. And the dogs go crazy and they're about to attack him. And he says himself, Elaha de Meir aneni, and the dogs stop. And the Roman sees, okay, there might be something to this. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. He saves Beruria's sister, takes him with her. And the Roman officials are passing by. They notice there's a woman missing. The guard gives them half of the money, half he kept for himself, works for a little while, and then it doesn't work anymore. And then they take this Roman, and they're about to hang him for doing this. And what happens at the last minute, they're about to hang him. He says, Elaha de Meir aneni, and the rope breaks, and he is saved. And from this story, people have the line Elaha de Meir aneni, as we saw in our tefillah, and this is what it's coming from. Now, Rabbi Meir, this is like a huge miracle, but let's not also forget that he was a very, very big Talmid Chacham, one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, and he had a really close relationship with God, especially if this works and because of all the learning. And from then on, a tradition developed that a Jew in crisis gives charity in memory of Rabbi Meir, and there's tons of tzedakah boxes all over that have Rabbi Meir on it. And I think it's important to know the backstory of it, so that I just share with you. I want to share another amazing story, which really brings tears to my eyes. Back then, people would go to the derashot of Rabbi Meir. When he would speak Torah, a lot of people liked going to listen to him. And there was a couple who, a man's wife went, and that week, Rabbi Meir spoke a little bit longer than usual. And they didn't have electricity back then. They would put oil in the candle. They would put extra usually. And she came back late, and there wasn't a lot of light. And the husband got very, very, very angry. And he said, I'm divorcing you. And do not come home unless you spit in the face of Rabbi Meir. That's not happening. He's a huge Talmid Chacham, one of the Tanaim. She's going to go and spit in his face. Now, Rabbi Meir found out about this, and he decided that he wanted to do something about it. And what he does is he invites the woman over, and he says, I have this illness in my eye, and the only way to cure it is if an expert spits in my eye. Are you an expert at curing in this way? And she says, no. So he says, okay, if you're not an expert, then please spit 7 times. I think that'll be sufficient. And she spits in his eye 7 times, and then she goes home, and her husband takes her back. Now, Rabbi Meir's students are puzzled. They go, how could you let a woman spit in your eye? And he says, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to have his name erased for Shalom Bayit, as we know with Isha Sotah, that when a man suspects his wife of cheating on him, the Kohen reads what's going to happen, and then he has God's name written on a parchment, and he erases God's name, and it's a very serious thing. So if God's going to have his name erased, I can lower my honor a little bit, big deal. And that just shows his greatness, how he realized that importance of Shalom Bayit, and if this is what the husband is going to threaten on his wife, if Rabbi Meir could help, he's going to help. So this is another story about him, and there are many more stories. I hope I piqued your interest a bit to go learn more about Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes. So this I told you verbally, and Kadosh Baruch Hu agreed that his holy name will be erased. How much more could I forgo my honor? Now, this is his grave that you pass. I'm saying on the highway because it literally is on the highway, and opposite the graves is the Kinneret. Notice there are two domes. One is a water blue one, and one is a pointy whitish one. The big one is for the Sephardim, and the small one is for the Ashkenazim. Why? Up until 1867, there were no buildings here. It was just an open field. And then people decided they wanted to build more permanent structures. At the time, the Sephardi community was very rich, and the Ashkenazi community was very poor. And the Sephardim built their more renovated, up-to-date, more beautiful structure, and they told the Ashkenazim, when you get money, you can build one too. Not let's lend you some, when you get money, build one too. So to this day, there are two domes built on top of his grave. That's just a bit about the architecture. Another very, very famous thing about Tiberia, and this leads to another rabbi associated with Tiberia, not such a known story, is Chamet Tiberia, the Tiberia hot springs. There is water there, which is 140 degrees Fahrenheit underground, rich with minerals. It comes all the way up, and once it reaches surface level, it's about 100 degrees. And very interesting in the Gemara, it says that, okay, well, let's go back to the Torah. When God brought the Mabul against Noach, it says that Mayanet Tehom, the waters of the deep underground were open. Not only was there the rain coming from the sky, also the water from the bottom rushed up and flowed. And according to the Gemara, there were 3 of these deep springs which were still left from the time of the Mabul. And one of them that they have listed is Chamet Tiberia, the hot springs of Tiberia. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is a rabbi that most people are familiar with. There is a lot of songs, Meron, Sham Rabbi Shimon. Also, unfortunately, Meron got a lot of, it's great that it's popular, but not the tragedy which happened a little while back on Lag BaOmer in Meron. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is known for writing the Zohar. He was with his son in the cave for 13 years. And when he came out of the cave, his skin was very, very sensitive to the sun because a person needs sunlight, and he wasn't in the sun if he's in a cave for 13 years, and it hurt him. Now he goes to Tiberia, and the people tell him, we have a way to help you. We have these amazing hot springs. Come in the hot springs and it'll cure you. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he goes in the hot springs of Tiberia and it cures his skin issues. And then he speaks to the people and says, I want to help you. You helped me so much. How could I help you? And they said, no, we have a problem in the city. And the problem is that there are a lot of graves and we're a lot of Kohanim, and we don't know where we could walk, where we can't, because Kohanim can't go near graves and we don't know exactly where they are. Can you help us identify them? And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai does something very unique. And of course he helps them. This is a flower known as a turmus. He takes these turmusim and he plants them all over the city. And anywhere where the turmus grow, he said there's a grave under here. How do you know? He said, because that means the dirt is fresher, there's a person buried, that means there's a grave. So that's how he figured it out. And that was something that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did to the people of Tiberia. So we have another rabbi associated with Tiberia. We already discussed Rabbi Meir Ba'al Hanes. Now an additional one is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The last one I want to speak about is the person who is buried in this grave. Now it's a very, very interesting design. It catches your eye, it's easy to spot. It's white during the day, lit up at night. And this is the grave of Harambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. What does this design have to do with him? So this is supposed to be Keter Torah, the crown of Torah. This is Harambam's grave. And it was newly renovated. They put millions of shekels into it because they get millions of visitors a year and they have the potential for that place. Harambam is one of the most famous chachamim ever, a philosopher, a doctor. What wasn't he? And this is the entrance to his grave. We have on the side, Harambam wrote, and here's you could see the crown from the bottom. I remember it being white, but it looks kind of reddish here. Harambam wrote the Mishneh Torah, or the Yad Chazakah, 14 pillars of Judaism, and he writes a book of halacha. And on the side, we have the 14 pillars. And I really like when a lot of thought is, I don't always know how to appreciate it. I guess after I learn about it, I can. When thought is put into the design to connect to who Harambam was, let's do pillars. He wrote Yad Chazaka, which is 14 in Gematria. Let's do that. So that's the design when you're walking up to his grave. And this is the headstone. Harambam is one of the, in Israel, we're not always sure that people are buried where the grave is. And a lot of times the way to know that people aren't sure, if it says Siyun Keved, Siyun Keved means like a monument to them. If you go to Ma'arat al-Machpelah, we're positive that the Avot and Imahot are there. But if you go inside, they have these like domes, and it'll say on it Siyun Keved Abraham or Siyun Keved Ifka, because they're actually in that spot. So Harambam is one of the people that we're fairly sure is buried in Tiberia. That was one of the things he requested. And they put a beautiful pasuk on his grave, Moshe ad Moshe lo kam ke Moshe. That from Moshe Rabbeinu until Moshe ben Maimon, there was no one as great as him. And one of the things I like about, I'm not such a grave person. I don't really go to graves that often. I know some people like doing that. But certain chachamim that I connect to, if I would go to Harambam's grave, then I would certainly take out one of his writings, one of his books, speak to the people that I am about Harambam and his greatness. And I think that's one of the ways to make it a meaningful experience, if your trip happens to be doing that, or if you want to learn what this person said, because then it just makes the experience that much richer. So this is Harambam's grave. And now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the attractions of Tiberia. I think everything we saw already is an attraction enough. I don't need any more reasons than what we saw to go to Tiberia. And there's even more we didn't talk about, but I think I gave you enough. But the more typical attractions that maybe would attract kids more, although I think if anything is done in the right way, it could all be attractive to kids. Here is a place called Aqua Kef, where they have in the Kinneret these floats and slides that you could climb up in. I've done it 3 times. I want to say it's more fun. It's very fun and go and do it, but it's more fun than it actually looks, because the truth is, it is so tiring to do it that after 10 minutes, you don't want to climb anymore and you just want to sit in the Kinneret. So if you ever go and I don't remember, they do limit the time. So do the minimum time. Don't like extend the hour and a half. If the minimum is 45 minutes, do that. It's more than enough. It's a very tiring thing to do, but also really fun. And the temperature of the Kinneret is always really great. So that's a really fun thing to do. Aqua Kef, open in the warmer months. Swimming is amazing. That you do not need to schedule. You could go to a beach, go swimming in the Kinneret, bring water shoes. It's very rocky, as you see in the picture. And it's just a heavenly experience in this great water. And you see on the other side, the Golan. It's also a really great place. They have banana boating and all kinds of water sports. And it's nice because when you're going on a jet ski or fast, the water going in your eyes doesn't have salt in it because it's a freshwater lake. So that's a fun thing. And of course, what is a day in Tiberia without a meal? This is Deck's restaurant, very, very, very famous. It's on the water. There's usually fireworks shows for something that you can see there. It's a meat restaurant. Very, very, very good food. Also very expensive, but very good. And this is a great experience if you're there to go and visit it. Let's summarize what we saw today. So we explored the city of Tiberia. We opened with designing shuls and how people are very careful not to go against the Aseret Hadiberot when designing a shul, which was very perplexing to us when we looked at the shul in Tiberia, and they have similar ones in other cities. When we saw Galgal HaMazalot, the zodiac signs, and all other kinds of strange, perplexing things, we spoke a bit about the background, that it was a city of Talmidei Chachamim, the last city where the Sanhedrin sat. We saw the mosaic with the 3 sections. The first one, which was more Jewish. The second one, which had Helios, the sun god, riding on his chariot, arm upraised, holding the round world, halo coming out of his head. And the bottom section, which was donations, thanking people that had donated money to the synagogue. Then we spoke about the hot springs of Tiberia and how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai enjoyed the hot springs and it helped cure his skin. And he in turn helped identify where people were buried. And even to get a sense of how many people are buried in Tiberias, we already spoke about three graves, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of how many people are actually buried there. Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, we said he's mentioned in the Anenus on the high holidays, and he's mentioned in Havdalah, and people just see tzedakah boxes with him. What was the big miracle? So we spoke about the miracle, El Had Meir Aneni, how that was saved the Roman soldier, and Rabbi Meir used it as well. And the beautiful story where he allowed a woman to spit in his face in order to keep peace in the house. We saw a picture of Harambam's grave, who was a huge Talmid Chacham also buried there. And of course, we ended with attractions. I hope you have a desire and an urge to visit Tveria. I know I do. I want to go jump in the Kinneret. I want to go visit the shul again. I want to go swim in the hot springs. I love Eretz Yisrael. And being far away from it, even though it's only been a few days, I feel it in my heart. And I want to go back, and I imagine you do too. And I hope that we should all be able to go to Eretz Yisrael soon. Thank you, and I wish you an amazing rest of the day. My pleasure, Lisa.
That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. We were in Tveria.
Yes, we were.
We have to go back now to do all these things.
100%. We did decks. We did the party on the boat. Yep. I remember it well.
I think so. Have a great day, Ralph.
Bye.
Bye.
That was an awesome class.
I'm so happy you joined. I was really very honored to see you.
Yeah, no, it's good you reminded me and sent the link, all that.
Yeah.
Sorry, my service was in and out outside.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
How I find it so amazing that like we think we know everything about Israel, and then there's just so much more. Like, never ending.
Every little crevice has so much detail, wealth of information going on.
Yeah, that's really
I really don't know what to think about the sun god and the zodiac. Like, I'm a little bothered.
I know. I am also, and you know what? I like that I'm bothered because we're bothered by things sometimes. That's just what it is. Like, I don't have an answer that I ever like. I'm just still bothered by it.
Like, I guess it makes them more real people. Like, they hired non-Jews to write their Hebrew words. Like, oh, we do that a little bit.
Right, exactly. You know, it's true. And also, I think the thing in the donations in the end, like, yeah, back then people wanted acknowledgement too. Like, nothing's new really. It's all could be found if you dig enough. So, anyway, we'll be in touch. I would love to hang out. Not so much around today, but later in the week for sure.
For sure. Okay, great.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.